Hello there, guys, and welcome back to my channel for what's not a preview, not a post-match reaction, but for what's actually a news stream. We haven't had time for one of these in ages. As you could probably have told, I was not available this weekend as it was my dad's birthday celebration, and I was away. So I did watch the game like on my phone on the side while birthday celebrations were happening. So I didn't see everything, but I did see the most important bits, and I will be perfectly straight up with you guys. After the bits that I did see, I did not really feel like watching the whole thing back because at the moment, Chelsea don't really give you that vibe. But that's why I'm joined by Pice, and that's why I'm joined by Connor. Connor, I'll start with you first and foremost. First of all, thank you for coming back on. It's been a while, I feel like, but I think it's a great time to have you back on because there are obviously the first talks coming out or the first reports, rumors coming out about who could potentially replace Pochettino at Chelsea. Before we get into those, and obviously people have seen it on the thumbnail and the title, it's not a secret who the names are, but just quickly before we get into that as a topic, where do you stand on how things are at Chelsea? Obviously, we should not ignore there is also still the possibility that Pochettino does stay. Again, we'll get into that in more detail later. But how do you feel things are at the moment? Because man, I don't know. Like me and Pies have just said it before you joined and just before we went live. It's just don't care. It's not the right word at the moment, but it's just so difficult to care because it's like to me, at least, everything at the club is so all over the shop that it doesn't really. I'm not really fully convinced that which manager comes in really changes it. So unless the plan from above changes, unless the structure potentially above changes, I'm not sure anyone can really fix it. But what's your take on it? How do you think Pochettino has done? How do you think the situation is right now, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, firstly, thanks for having me back on. It has been a while. You always seem to catch me at the wrong moments whenever you ask.
Yeah, I do ask people too late notice. I do apologize.
Yeah, it just didn't align. But thanks for having me back on. With Poch at the minute and just with the club, I think since that cup final, I think it's got really hostile. I think even before that, there was before that Aston Villa win in the FA Cup, things got really hostile as well. People wanted him out before we even got to the Liverpool Cup final.
Yeah.
Where I stand on it is pretty much, I've said it quite a lot. I get quite a lot of stick on it on Twitter because a lot of people do really want him out. And I'm fully in the boat of, and I've never been in the boat that he was the end goal coach. I always sort of saw him as the developer of what we could then turn into. So my view on him was that he'd allow this team to grow, build a structure behind closed doors that players seem comfortable in. And from some things that we've seen and heard, it looks like they're at least together and there's a bit of a bond being formed. So at least that part of the job, supposedly on the surface level, looks like it could be going okay. Obviously, results aren't great. Tactically, I don't highly rate him. I don't think he's good enough to win things at a high level, and I think that the next manager is the more important piece of the puzzle. I think they would have wanted Poch to be here for the whole 2 years of his contract. So next year, hopefully, like what if in their heads it would have developed next year, we could have continued to progress a little bit. And then at the end of next season, they could have gone for that end game manager to then push and try and become that bigger side and try and win some things and actually try and get back to where we were. But I think with how hostile things have got, the media, that it's not been good enough, some really poor performances scattered around as well. I think that the hand's going to be forced. I think it's going to be this summer, and I think it is make or break, this appointment. I've said that before as well. I think this one will be major in the trajectory of the team.
I do agree. I'll ask one more question on this before I get to Pice. Do you think, because I've kind of felt that for Potter last year, and if I'm honest, as much as I don't like Pochettino, as much as I don't think he should be here anymore, I also think it kind of applies to Pochettino. With the situation that the whole club is in, I'm not really sure many, if any, managers would have been able to get anything good enough out of the club that the fans would have accepted. I see so many people talking about the new manager. He needs to try to build a relationship with the fans. He needs to like be more charismatic. And I'm like, well, that is in a way true. I think unless we start going back to winning, let's say, most games like we did, towards even at least the end of Roman's era, unless we go back to that, I don't think it really matters whether the manager is charismatic or tries to build a relationship with the fans. Unless we start winning, none of them will get liked by the fans, I don't think. Like, sure, you could rehire someone that there's already an existing relationship, like a Jose. Then maybe there would be something to begin with. But in the grand scheme of things, and not just talking from the fans' point of view or the fan side of things, but just with the club being so all over the shop. Obviously, last year we started a transition with Potter, then we continued it with Pochettino. But really, we were so all over the shop. What do you think Poch has done wrong that he could have done better, so that we wouldn't have been in this situation now? Because sure, he should be tactically better and all these kinds of things. But in the grand scheme of things, other than maybe not dropping Mudryk every time he scores a goal, I'm not really sure what he should have done differently where I really believe, okay, then it would have been better. So in a way, it's like Potter and him were just sacrificial lambs, really. So that also makes me think we should have just kept Potter, then we at least would have only had one sacrificial lamb rather than two. But that's exactly why what you've said, that's what scares me. And I'm going to bring this up before I let you answer. My apologies. I tweeted this. I want Poch gone. But at the moment, I'm so terrified that they're going to get the next appointment completely wrong as well, that in a way, in my head, we're arguably better off not sacking him. Because and I still do want to sack him, but you get my point of view, because if we sack him and we get it wrong again, first of all, in the beginning, we'll have all the hope. We'll try to be positive, especially if we are content creators, whether that's on Twitter or YouTube, whatever you do. We're going to try to be positive, going to try to see, light at the end of the tunnel. And then what if it goes wrong again? I'm not sure I have the fucking energy to just live what I've experienced the last 2 years again with a third manager. So I know this was a lot of different questions, but do you think Poch could have done anything differently so that we wouldn't have ended up here?
Not really. And a lot of people disagree with that, but I do think he was dealt the hand that he was dealt. There is things tactically he just doesn't fit us. So that was always apparent. I never thought he was going to get the best out of an Enzo, even though I thought their relationship would probably be quite good because of their Argentinian link. And Pochettino has said about Enzo even before he joined that he respected him and things like that. So, but there was major flags about that sort of thing to begin with. So that isn't something that surprised me. I think in terms of maybe the effort he could make with the fans going over, a few off comments before the Tottenham game, those comments that came out that he about his respect for the club, maybe just steer away from little comments like that even though he doesn't mean them in the bad light, people know what the media will do to those sort of comments, they'll twist them. So maybe a little bit more careful and precautious in that manner. Yeah. But I think other than that, I think he's had a lot of injuries. Like I say, I think he's actually done the development side of things. I know a lot of people like Mudryk, maybe you could look at it and think, right, every time he gets to a bit of a confident area, then he's taken back out of the limelight and he sort of gets dropped and things like that. So maybe that side of the development hasn't been as good as it could have been. But I do actually believe that the players feel comfortable in his leadership behind closed doors. So if that is meaning that they're settling quicker, we have a lot of different players from a lot of different backgrounds and they've all come from playing in different leagues. If Pochettino just at least brings them together, they gel a bit and it brings us better next season for the next manager that takes over, then I think that's about as much as I would have wanted from him personally. Obviously, it's not been good enough this year. I'm not trying to say it has been, but I didn't expect it to be. Let's just say that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Obviously, I also agree in terms of off the pitch. There's certainly a lot of things he could have done better. Like you touched on certain comments, even this past weekend. Honestly, it's got to a point where I'm like, are you even being is he taking a piss? Because let me just get the quote up because it's baffled me so much. Where is it? There it is. Poch said, I think these performances have been very good. I'm so happy with the performances. When he says something like that, I'm like, surely you cannot be being serious. I think he's a helmet and whatever you want to call him, right? But he can't be this stuffed. Surely he can't actually sit there and think we've played well. I don't know to what standards he thinks this is happening. But Pais, I'll come to you now, and I'll read the super chats by Miguel. Thank you very much for them out in a second. But I'll go to you, Pais. First of all, on the back of the Brentford game, like I said, I saw it on the side. I saw the goals we conceded. I saw Brentford hit the post multiple times. I saw us, in particular, Palmer and first half Jackson, miss chances. First of all, just quickly on that game, but also on what we've just discussed. You've been more against Poch and earlier to be Poch out than maybe some others, but I think this is and this is by no means trying to defend Poch, but still a bit of a realistic assessment of the situation. Do you think Poch, there was anything Poch could have done on the pitch? Again, what Conor said in terms of off the pitch stuff, I think that's undebatable that he certainly could and should have done things better from that perspective. But with on the pitch, could he really have done things so differently that we would not be in a situation right now where we would want him gone? Because now, obviously, he could have not bottled it in the extra time of the cup final. But even the cup final, even if we win that, sure, things will be better. But you and me, Pies, because of that cup final, would we now be Poch in? I don't think we would be. So in the grand scheme of things, other than maybe, like I said, not dropping Mudryk every time he scores and not rushing players back from injury, is that much that he could have done different? Or was it, like Conor said, a bit of a hand that he's been dealt where it's like, didn't really matter who came in, then we're always going to end up being a sacrificial lamb? Or do you disagree with that?
No, I disagree. I think if you didn't have dinosaur tactics, we might actually, believe in Pochettino. We might actually believe in a project. I mean, to be honest with you, I was quite excited in pre-season because I think we were playing pretty decent football. And I think even though I never wanted Pochettino, I was like, well, he could develop players. He's done this before at Spurs. I kind of ignored the little PSG, stint that he had in terms of like people were saying he's got outdated tactics and they don't do tactical training sessions very often, according to Julian Laurens. I kind of ignored that a bit because I was like, well, PSG, everyone, there's always stories at PSG. Let's focus on what he'd done in the Premier League. But it seems like he's just heavily outdated. I mean, I even saw a video the other day. He was on the tactics board in Sky Sports. He was talking about, how he pushes Enzo Fernandez forward and he wants to do the same with Caicedo eventually. So people are like, well, is he waiting for Lavia? Well, what he's waiting for, this is the one. What he's waiting for is to push Caicedo and Enzo forward. And, it'll be Lavia by himself, a 19, 20-year-old. He's going to play lone DM if he's still staying and Lavia comes back. And, there'll be no midfielder again. I think the midfield is probably the most important area on the pitch. And I think he's absolutely sucked at setting that up this season. I think we've absolutely stunk most of the games. And to be honest with you, in terms of the super chat, I agree, but we will give them time if they deserve time. I'm not sitting here defending a manager that does so many things wrong when he's got such a talented group of players. If Pochettino set us up well every single game and it was literally just down to missing chances and down to players missing chances, I would go, okay, Pochettino has laid the foundations. We are playing a consistent style. Yeah, there may be little issues with man management or, substitutions at the wrong time. Fair enough. But that won't be enough for me to be Pochettino out at that point. For me, he's just doing so many things wrong. Like, for example, there was that table. If, based on the second half performances this season, we'd be in the relegation zone. How can you get worse in the second half than the first half? If anything, every single game. If anything, you're supposed to have a slow start to the game and then pick it up as the game goes on. That's kind of what we had with Tuchel, right? But at least Tuchel motivated them in the second half to kick them up the backside. So it's kind of we've flipped opposites, really. Graham Potter, I mean, to be honest, I've tried to distance out him from Chelsea existence. I don't really remember too much. But Pochettino, I'm hoping to do the same with him because I think he's absolutely useless. I think he's a dinosaur. If we had, Reece James and Fofana and that injuries back, we probably would be higher. But based on individual quality alone, I can't really tell you 5 team goals we've scored this season under this manager. Like, so many games I watch on TV and at the ground, I'm sat here thinking, what do we do? Almost all of our play is individuals making stuff up by themselves. You saw them on the weekend. Gusto, in the second half, was like left wing back because he was going on a run. It's like, like we don't have a set system. We don't have a set style of play. I can't tell you what our style of play is. I can't. It's just individuals playing on intuition. Like, I'm not the greatest at tactics, but, please, someone, tell me different. Tell me you think Pochettino has tactics, because I don't. Maybe he does, but they're completely washed. They're like 5 or 6 years old. So,
yeah.
yeah, the sooner he's gone, the better. The Brentford game was embarrassing. Yes, Cole Palmer missed a really good chance. And, you know, games like that, or moments like that, if we actually have a good performance, I'd be like, okay, well, Pochettino can't put the ball in the net. You know, even at times I defended Potter because we used to miss so many chances. But the Brentford game, it was just like the first half, I got cooked for saying we didn't play well in the first half. Everyone was like, well, what more do you want? You want control, you know, we're leading or whatever. And I was like, yeah, but, you know, apart from that goal where Gusto crossed to Jackson, again, bit of individual brilliance, let's be honest, from both of them. I was like, well, you're not really done much. We just kind of passed the ball around as usual. Maybe it'll be a scrappy win, but I'm not really that impressed, to be honest, considering, you know, like the cup final performance, I think was, you know, in the 90 minutes was okay. And Brentford had like the whole back four out and we played a three at the back to try and match them up. I'd expect us to do that when they're at their complete best. I think we should have gone for them more. And in the second half, we literally got worse and we conceded goals. And okay, the Vista goal was, again, a bit of individual brilliance, but, you know, there was chances that Brentford had. They just suddenly started playing so much better than us. And you could see two teams, one, that Thomas Frank had got them in at half time and gone clearly berserk at the Brentford players. This is not good enough. You could see their reaction. And you saw Chelsea just get worse and just that we were like, oh shit, how do we actually deal with Brentford playing well now? It's a complete embarrassment. I honestly, this is the same with Graham Potter. I really think, right, as much as the manager, as much as the players might respect or might like Pochettino as a person, because they all talk about, you know, how he's a good manager and how like they Pochettino makes an effort for the personal side of him. That's all good and well, but it doesn't mean they take him like serious as a manager. Like I bet you, whenever Pochettino goes, I bet there'll be stories about talking behind his back, you know, not taking things seriously. There was a guy that joined the space I was on the other day after the game, and he was, you know, I don't know if it was true, but he was claiming to know someone from the club. He knew an agent, and he basically said that while they respect Pochettino, there's been like little occasions where the players have sort of talked among themselves. Like apparently the players were like really confused as to why Chalobah came on in the cup final and why he took Chilwell off, because the players obviously, when they were basically playing for penalties on their, you know, like on their mind, according to Pochettino, apparently they were like, well, why is he taking Chilwell off when he's going to be one of our penalty takers? So there'll always be things like that going on in the background. And I just think, I just hope we don't get forward. Even if we have a good end to the season, he just needs to go. This summer is going to be like the managerial market as much as the transfer market. Like, look how many managers are moving. Nagelsmann will move after Euros. You know, we're not going to get Tuchel, but Tuchel's moving. De Zerbi's going to move. Amorim's going to move. Alonso's going to move. Arne Slot might move. There's like 8-9 managers out there that are probably better than Pochettino. So. Yeah, long-winded answer, but I just wanted to
it's all good, bro. It's all good. There's a lot to it, and I wanted to touch on something because Connor hinted at it as well. The whole relationship thing with the players and the manager, right? We all of us heard or read the stuff that Goldberg released, let's say, on his Patreon, like what after we lost to Wolves at home. I still don't really know what to make of that. I'm not sure if you've heard any more in the background, Pies, that, or whether if you did, you could even say it. But even that is like that comes out. Initially, I was like, okay, but let's take this with a pinch of salt. It's just after we lost this home game. It's typical type of stories to come out when things are going really badly. But it's also typical for the opposite type of stories, for players speaking well of the manager, for stories of there being a good relationship. That's also typical of PR work by the club when they see the PR work is going against the manager in the media. So what even is this? Like, I'm not sure if you know, Pies, or maybe it's a question of what do you think it's like, but it's just, what do you think it is like? Because I don't even know what to think anymore in that sense, because the players don't, like, if you get worse every second half, if you get worse every time you speak to the manager, essentially, right? Even take the cup final, right? Started off poorly, found our way into the game. Second half, started off poorly again, found our way into the game. Spoke to the manager again after 90 minutes, got worse again. Every time they speak to Poch, they get worse. So surely you can't exactly think, they're either not comprehending what Poch says, but with Poch's level of English, I don't think it's that complex what he's saying. So how can they get worse every time? It's just, but that if because that is the case, I just cannot really believe that whole idea of what Chalobah is saying, oh, we're all fighting for Pochettino, or that they all like him so much. I'm like, if you like the manager, if you're fighting for the manager, you're not getting worse every time you talk to him. Like, we can talk about tactics and Poch being tactically outdated and all of these things all we want. But really, we all know that us getting worse in the second half against Brentford has nothing to do with tactics. I don't know what it is, but I don't think it's Poch has now changed tactics and now we're all of a sudden worse, or has not adapted tactics. Like, I don't know. Like, everything that's what I mean, right? Everything at the club is a calamity. The medical staff, the nutritionist. Like, I see Cole Palmer talking about how he loves a Chinese after a game. I'm like, well, flipping brilliant. To be fair to him, he's one of the guys that's almost always fit. So how much of a go can we have? And he runs a lot as well. So we can't. But it still shows a problem in principle. I'm like, no. Like, do you think bloody Man City players go and have a Chinese after a game? To be fair, that's where Palmer came from, so maybe they do, but it just sounds baffling to me. The whole thing is all over the shop. I want to quickly react to Miguel's super chat. I know you already did, Pies, but he says issue is that next gen managers are all project managers who will need time. Regardless, these managers must be given time. And you hinted at it there, Pies, in terms of if certain things were happening, you would be giving time. And I'll take this to you with that as well now, Connor, because for me, I'm not even sure if that reality exists, not in terms of being given time, but in terms of that a manager that needs time, in quotation marks, things go smoothly enough for a period that there's never this situation where you're like, manager out. Like, you look at Arteta at Arsenal, and I'm not saying, you know, who knows whether they actually will in the end achieve something, but even if they don't win something, I don't think it's up for debate that they got significantly better as a whole team, as a football club, since he's joined compared to now. But if you also look at Arsenal, they had times when half of their fan base were asking for Arteta to get sacked. So, and how many other examples even are there at a club of this magnitude where a manager, a project manager, came in and then was given the time? If you could argue that Arteta is probably the closest thing to it. And they also had these periods where most of the fans, or a lot of the fans, shall I say, wanted the manager out. So I'm not even sure if this exists, this alternate reality in where you get this project manager in, and yes, you just struggle in front of goal, but everything else is like kind of good. You're slowly improving. You see patterns. Because if we're talking about, okay, we have young players, they're missing in front of goal, we also have young players everywhere else on the pitch. So these young players are also going to make defensive howlers. They're going to screw up possession in midfield a lot, like Caicedo has done a few times and cost us goals in that sense when he's just not released the ball for some odd reason, even though we all know he's a good player. But just these weird things that only happen to young players, that don't happen to someone that's 28. It happens to young players because they're experienced, overwhelmed with the pressure. But I'm not, I mean, Connor, what do you think? Is there such a thing as a project manager that comes in where it doesn't get quite bad for a certain amount of time? Like, I don't like the way Pies explained it, where it's like if we were playing well and just missing in front of goal, but I don't think that exists. I don't think that's realistic to expect. Like, I don't know if realistic to expect is the right word, but I'm not sure if that will happen with anyone. Not even less so with the ones available. But even in the grand scheme of things, is that even possible? What do you think, Connor?
Yeah, with the whole like Pochettino and him being the one to do that, I think he was never. I didn't ever think his tactics were the fit. Like I said before, I thought he was always sort of like the bridging gap between the sort of the making the team into what then could be given to somebody else who then could challenge. With Arteta, use as an example, he very early he got a lot of shouts for out, and I remember at the time actually, well, I was hoping that they did sack him because I like Arteta. Even at the beginning for Arsenal, I thought he was really good. I thought he showed really good signs. He's like what he wanted to do was very clear, and it was just taking time to integrate. And the players wanted him out, but not the players. Sorry, the fans wanted him out.
But he was even in his second season, wasn't he? Because in his first season, he won the FA Cup against us, didn't he? And that essentially saved him the job at the time. But then even in his second or maybe third season, I swear there was people calling for him to get sacked. And I'm like, at Chelsea, this is probably even more extreme than it is at Arsenal because they've already gone through a much longer period of dread, of poor performances, of lack of results. Obviously, they've won their cups in between every now and again, but in the grand scheme of things, of winning league titles, my God, they've had a whole lot of waiting to do, right? So I don't like if it ever got that far at Chelsea, we'd already be way more against the manager than they were against him. I think.
Yeah, I think we've sort of created our own thing now where I sort of agree with some of the things Pi said about you need to see a vision to jump on board with it and to actually believe in it, to stick with someone. But I also think that at Chelsea, that is not the case. And I think the route they've tried to go down, the way I view this I try and break this down, is the first window, in my opinion, was scattergun. I think they thought that was a different route. That wasn't. I don't think that was part of the project. I think they only made the choice to move towards this like youth strategy and actually going down that line after that first window. I think that first window was awful. Got players Tuchel wanted, got rid of him, and then we had to basically start again. Then the windows after that, I actually don't think have been too bad. But what you are saying is we're going to buy young. We're going to buy players that aren't ready for now. We're not going to buy any experience to put around them. And we're going to sell the only players in our team that are experienced to spend more on young players. So you've got rid of all these players that have used to the culture of the club and they've been around for a while. And they're older and they've been in the Premier League, like even just like Havertz and
Can I
Mount, for
quickly
example.
intercept there as well? On terms of the knowing the culture of the club.
Yeah.
We would have young players that would know that. Those are the ones from the academy, but those they're also trying to fucking sell.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there is those few young players that would know what you're talking about. We're trying to get rid of those even more than the others because of pure fucking profit.
Yeah. And it's all going down this route now where it's all going towards this, like building this young team and setting it up for the future. But where they've lost a lot of people is not many people are willing to wait because we've been so good at papering over cracks in the past. If we do have a bad year, we'll go on and win a trophy. And like we've been so good at that. That's been something that's in our DNA to the point where fans aren't patient. They're not going to be patient. The fact that we've now slipped off for 2 years isn't good enough. And also to the degree we've slipped off, because if we'd have slipped off to come in 4th, 5th, 6th at the lowest, I'd say, maybe people wouldn't be as aggressive towards it, because at least you'd know that there's still some progress, and then the next season if you can progress again. But falling all the way to 10th, 11th, then the fans aren't going to allow that. And I think the club have sort of brought it upon themselves by trying to do everything in one go, selling everybody in one go, buying £1 billion worth of assets in one go. I hate the whole £1 billion spend being used against us, but I think as a whole, the project that they've tried to build isn't just about who they've bought. For now, it's also about a lot of the players that aren't even part of this yet, like your Kendry Paez, a lot of the Angelo, these players that are spread around. Like eventually, that is what the money's been spent for, to have a wider thing. And I think we're only going to see in a few years if this really works. But you can't, at a club like Chelsea, you can't just hope for the best and do it all in one go, because you're going to lose the fans along the way. And I think that's where they went wrong, because I don't necessarily disagree. I still believe in the next few years it will come good. I'm one of the believers, but I think they went around it the wrong way, is how I'd put it together.
I hear it, and I'll tell you, for me, I was in that same camp until we lost to Wolves on Christmas Eve, and I don't know, maybe it was the day that they made it, but ever since then, I'm like, I've lost all faith. not necessarily that my faith can't be won back, but for now, I'm like, you prove to me that you actually know what you're doing before I believe in you again, because all you've shown me so far is that you don't know what you're doing. Because I understand what you're saying, right? But for me, it's like, unless they know more than we know, and there is a transfer ban coming eventually because of old stuff of Roman, what they're doing, what they have done, I should say, is just stupid. Like the amount, like it's not even a Kendry Paez's. He isn't a problem. The problem are the 25 players between 17 and 20 that we've bought, because it's physically impossible to ever have all of them. Because like if you had a big spread out multi-club model, then you can do something. But we only have 2 clubs right now. So even for the 2 clubs we have, they've bought too many. So it's just to me, there's just no logic to half of the things they're doing, because even what you're saying in terms of they've bought good players, sure. But will these good players, because they're talented, even develop the way that they can in the environment that we've put them in, right? Because will Caicedo, will they become as good players at Chelsea as they could have become somewhere else? Because they're now not surrounded by players, showing them the way, showing them this is how you look after yourself, this is how you eat, this is how you sleep, this is how you like treat yourself, this is how you pay attention to the manager, this is how it's important. No, they're all. It's like going to school for them. It's literally they're just going to school, hanging out with their mates, same age as them. No one teaching them anything other than a manager who believes in lemons. Like, do you know what I mean, I'm going to go into the second super chat from Miguel a little bit later again, because before we talk about the replacements, I quickly just want to speak about the fact that Poch could still stay. Jacob Steinberg said Pochettino's future next season is likely to depend on if he gets European football. Pais, where do you stand on this? Because this has been spoken about in like essentially it's been spoken about really since last summer, right? That would be what he needs. But the problem for me is they keep saying European football, but something in me just cannot imagine that Conference League suffices for them, because Conference League, yes, it's Europe, but it's such a. It's like saying, "Oh, we're playing. Our aim is to be in the English league," and then you play Championship and you're buzzing. That's kind of like how. That's kind of what the Conference League is. Surely the Conference League isn't enough. I know it is, because we've briefed it enough. But that's the thing that baffles me, because that could still happen. I know people say like Dexter now, we won't get Europe, and judging by a game like Brentford, maybe not. But that will at least the possibility of it. That will be open, I think, until May. That will at least be a possibility to scrape 7th or 8th, depending on who wins the FA Cup, and also how the other English clubs do in the Champions League, depending on does the 5th spot get Champions League, and then all the European spots drop down one, and even 8th gets Conference League, right? That is still possible as far as I'm aware. So, Price, where do you stand on, like, this is the worst case scenario in a way, that we're even already talking about managerial replacements, and then in the end he just stays?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what I'll do if he stays next season. I'll be fucking fuming probably. Yeah, I mean, it is worrying. I think Chelsea is so unpredictable, and the owners, well, particularly Barley and Feliciano, because they seem to be more in control nowadays. They seem to be pleased by pretty much anything. You know, they've got absolutely no standards at all. So, go on a run, maybe lose the FA Cup final, or if we win the FA Cup final, like, does he stay just because he's won a trophy, forgetting literally everything else? Is it just a strong finish to the end of the season? Is it just Conference League, or is he going to be judged on, because the thing is like, they talk about all this data and they brief that how we're using all this data and things. We'll go look at some of the data from this season. I'm pretty sure all of it or majority of it will be, against Poch rather than for him. Maybe earlier on in the season, the data will be a bit more for him, but we've definitely downtrended. Like, our defense has just got 10 times worse, I think. The amount of goals we're conceding compared to what we was. And obviously the big one is like the second half dip is just completely like, how can you explain that other than he's a shit manager? I don't get it. So, yeah, I think, even if you was to say, well, it's the players' mentality, well, you won't go and buy experienced players, will you? You'll go and buy more kids. So it can't be that, because, that you can't fix it like that. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's weird how, like, we're kind of briefing. We've heard a few little briefs about potential managers and stuff. Like, for me, when you hear like clubs, if it's true, like adding managers to a list, it's like, okay, you've kind of already decided that, yeah, he'll probably be going. Like, let's get prepared just in case, especially because this summer there's going to be a lot of movement. So it's not like other summers where, maybe one or two managers move or whatever. Like, a lot of managers are going to move this summer. So I feel like
for me, that makes it even more scary, though. I'm not sure about you, but for me, the fact that so many big clubs are looking for a manager makes it even more likely that we end up with some below par manager again. I'm not sure how you see that, but like we're now talking about De Zerbi and Amorim. There is every chance in the world that Alonso goes to Bayern, Amorim goes to Liverpool, and De Zerbi goes to Barcelona. And then what? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I think we'll always have a certain amount of pull. I feel like we've probably got maybe one more year. I agree with Connor. I think next year, this next managerial appointment, if it happens, it can't be a case of we sack him next season. Like, it just can't happen. Like, we've probably got one more summer left of, like, winning people over with our project. But after that, if you have 3 bad seasons and players aren't developing and stuff, I think you're not dead in the water, but you ain't going to go and pull players you want and managers you want. There's got to be a limit, of how much our name can be used in a certain sense. We'll always offer managers a lot of money, but at the end of the day, managers, especially the modern managers, the ones we'd be targeting, probably the younger data-driven managers, they want to be aligned to a vision. And I just don't know how much longer we can, project our so-called project and vision onto these people and these players and the managers. I mean, maybe the players is easier because, luckily, especially with the African players like Osimhen and stuff, we may get him just purely because he wants to play here because of Mykhailo and Drogba, Like that could genuinely happen still. We've got a lot of players from the last era that could help us pull players by themselves. But with the managers, it's different. It's, again, it's very difficult because whatever manager comes in, if there isn't going to be a manager comes in, God hope there is, he's got to want to work within this sporting structure. He's got to want to, he's going to want to know as well why the hell Pochettino didn't work out. Because let's not forget, Pochettino, as much as we don't rate him, he's quite an experienced manager. And he was at Spurs a long time. And I feel like managers are going to look at this and feel like, well, a manager as experienced as Pochettino, who's worked in the Premier League, has not worked at Chelsea. Why is that? Like, there's going to be a lot of questions that, the directors and the owners are going to have to try and, scoot around or answer, because I just don't know. I think there was a report from Matt Law. Matt Law said that one of the candidates that could potentially take over Chelsea, who he thinks he'd basically be in the running, as someone close to that manager said, that basically every manager would struggle with this team. So it's like managers are going to look at us with a really careful view.
I think any manager would struggle.
I think managers are going to really look at us with a careful view. So but honestly, I'm shit scared of us ending the season well and them using that to paper over the cracks. Especially the season tickets and the general prices are going to rise next season. They keep Poch, who the fans don't want. It's going to get messy, I tell you. Like, it really is. The away fans were chanting, F off Mauricio. That's the away fans, by the way. They're like the diehard core ones, right? It's not even happened at home yet. So, and just to go back to your point.
That's only because the home fans never sing, even that.
Well, I was going to say, I'm really surprised that, going back to your point of, I think you kind of basically said, well, I don't think any manager is going to get time here. I feel like the fans, that go to the games are kind of, we always want to win and stuff, and we're pissed off when we lose, but we are understanding of the position we're in terms of the squad, and we can't really do anything about it. Like, we're not got that, we can't have that same entitlement as, we did under Roman. Like, it's just it's a different era. We've got different players and unfortunately different expectations. I think fans understand that, but what they don't understand is stupid comments, shit tactics, and being 11th in the table. That's not acceptable. 6th, 5th, 7th is not acceptable, but it is for the starting season.
Don't worry. According to their data, we are actually 5th anyway.
Oh, don't start, bro. It's fucking embarrassing. It is embarrassing, honestly.
It is. Conor, let me get to you on this, because we obviously want to discuss De Zerbi and Amorim as well before Champions League kicks off at 8. Is this also, in your mind, the worst case scenario, that we've gone to where we are already? Pretty much the entire fan base wants him gone. I know not everyone, and not everyone wants him gone as badly as each other. But in the grand scheme of things, most people think, this is probably not tenable for much longer, because even if you thought Poch was a good enough manager, I think anyone that understands how football clubs work, once the majority of the fan base is so much against the manager, there is almost no saving that. So the whole idea that there is still a chance that he gets saved, even if in my opinion this is more PR brief because of stuff that we've known months ago, where the club will want to do an end of the season review and then make a final decision, rather than that there's actually a real possibility these days, in my opinion. But would it also be the worst case scenario for you, or do you think there is a scenario in which keeping Poch for one more year puts us in a better position for better managers the year after?
I think that the hand has been forced now. I think I was in the boat that if we could have maybe got Europe, if we'd have won the Cup, maybe got Europe, if we'd won the Carabao, then we could have got through another year of Poch, and then it may have left us in a better position to then go and give Poch that full 2 years of letting our players grow up. Because next year now, we're giving the team over, a team that still technically isn't ready. Like, it's not, ready to compete as much. I believe in a lot of the players. I actually think we've recruited quite well, and a lot of people won't agree with that. But I think we've got some really good players in the core of the team. I think you give a lot of these players to some big managers, and they'd be very happy with a lot of them.
For sure.
But I think that he's gone at the end of the season no matter what at this point. I think the managers that have also starting to become available is also forcing the hand a bit as well, because I think that the more managers sort of become, Bayern looking for a manager, Liverpool and all these teams, it sort of makes the hunt to get in one of these top managers, you need to do it quicker, you need to get your head in the race sort of thing. So yeah, I think no matter what, I think he's gone. I think now it's just treading water, sort of PR to the end of the season, so that things don't turn and get worse, because the last thing we need is the media on our backs whilst we've still in the FA Cup and we've still got some important games. The off chance that we can get up to like 8th, it's crazy that I'm saying that, off chance that we can get to 8th, but
It is.
The chance that we get that, whilst it's still there, I personally don't think we'd gain anything from sacking him now. I think end of the season, start doing the background work right now, so that when you do make that decision at the end of the season, we're in the best possible place to make the correct one, because as we've all pretty much said, that next one is huge, and if you get it wrong, that is when even people like me that actually believe that this could go somewhere, I think if the next appointment is wrong, then we're in the middle of the water, really. I think it'll be quite dangerous territory to be in. So
Absolutely.
That's right. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I think if we get this one wrong, God knows how long it will take us to ever go back to the top, if that even ever happens. I'll be perfectly honest. Like, especially nowadays, it's not like when Roman joined, where we were one of 4 with big money. We're now one of 10 with big money. Like, it's very different to what it was 15, 20 years ago. If you have just having and spending money doesn't mean a certain level of success now. It used to. It doesn't anymore now, and that's kind of the issue. But let's get into talking about the replacements. Obviously, as you can see on the thumbnail and the title, it's essentially between Roberto De Zerbi and Ruben Amorim. Now, does that mean conclusively it will only be between those two? No. There is also reports from Ben Jacobs who says Xabi Alonso is appreciated, but let's be real, we ain't getting Xabi Alonso. If it was my wish, I would probably go for Xabi Alonso. Is he also attached to risk? Of course, because I know he's done stuff with Real Sociedad and worked in lower levels of football a bit before that, after retiring as a player. But we're not getting Leverkusen's manager right now, especially if they win the league. There's no way he picks us out of all the other options he will have. But these are still the options. Now, there's still people talking about Nagelsmann. I will be honest, I was very much in the camp of like, well, Nagelsmann is at the Euros. By the time he's done at the Euros, we will have started preseason. So that's flipping way too late. But then I've now, just earlier, seen a Pys conversation on Twitter where I think it was Matisse, was it? Or was it someone else that said that we did get Conte after the 2016 Euros where he was with Italy. So I'm like, that is true. But what if Germany make the final? You know how late that is? Like, you can't bring a manager in so late. Like, to me, that this is unfeasible at all, like completely. So realistically, it's kind of between De Zerbi and Amorim, I think. Obviously, please, both of you, if you have a different opinion on this, please say it. I just want to get to Miguel's second super chat quickly, who said, also serial winners are either settled or outdated. Next manager must be a modern manager that fits the squad. CV matters less than who fits best. And the problem with that last sentence is I still think that the CV, or no, in terms of who fits best, I still think that at Chelsea that combines. Because if you haven't won before, the fans will not believe that you will win it ever. Ask Graham Potter about this. Because I think in terms of who fits best, I still think now, if Potter was in a position where he won games regularly for us, the attitude by the fans wouldn't have been what a wuss, what a pussy, what a wet wipe, what a this, what a that. People would be saying, oh, what a gentleman. Look at our manager. Unlike Klopp, he doesn't constantly complain about the manager. He says it is what it is. We'll move on. We'll win anyway. But because when you lose all the time, that doesn't work. And that's when the fans flip. So that's why I'm like, who fits best? Will they get long enough to prove that they fit best without a good CV first? And that's the problem that I have. And that's why I'm just not sure. So I'll bring the first one up. just to speak about De Zerbi first, because I know, Conor, you've already done a lot more research on Ruben Amorim yourself and not quite finished your in-depth review, essentially, of Roberto De Zerbi. But I'll start with you and then go to Pys about De Zerbi. And there's also comments here by Sally, who says De Zerbi is a disaster. 7 times sacked, so bad in only 7% win rate with Palmer, average 30% win rate, guys, a minutes. But then you go watch that clip of Kevin Prince Boateng and him speaking of Roberto De Zerbi, and you think he's literally the greatest thing since sliced bread. So, but then again, it's Kevin Prince Boateng, who is a bit mental. So what does he know? But where do you stand on De Zerbi, Conor? Because I keep flip-flopping. There was a time where I was like, nah, we cannot go for De Zerbi purely because he's at Brighton. Then I saw that Kevin Prince Boateng clip a few weeks ago, and I was like, okay, we have to get him. And now I'm almost back to my thing. Nah, it's Brighton. We cannot, for the PR, even if De Zerbi, if De Zerbi worked, I don't know what the good example would be right now, but say De Zerbi worked at Brentford, right, instead of Thomas Frank. I think fans would actually be okay with De Zerbi. But if we actually go back to Brighton, I think no matter what he says, that's what I was thinking. Wasn't he at a completely different club in Italy than Parma? But anyway, each of their own, right?
Palermo, I think.
Palermo, maybe he got Palermo.
He's also at Sassuolo, and he definitely did.
Sassuolo was his last job before Brighton.
Yeah, Sassuolo, he was good.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Vic, that's not the relevant part here. It's not about whether the players average or not. The players worked with big managers, including Jurgen Klopp, and still keep screaming about how De Zerbi is by far the best manager he's had. But yeah, Conor, where do you stand on De Zerbi? And if you want to say, okay, purely from a footballing perspective, there's this, but then still the whole Brighton thing is an issue.
Yeah, that is basically where I land on it. Like I said, I've started doing the work on it this week. I've done work on De Zerbi before, but now I'm sort of relating it to Chelsea. So I'm sort of starting it from scratch and just redoing everything just to make sure that I'm thorough with what I'm doing. I want to make sure it's of a high standard for Chelsea. But firstly, the comments about his old jobs, I think if anything, he's grown with his jobs. I think it's actually something that makes him quite good. I quite like that about him. He's got that sort of dare to dream character. He's sort of risen through the ranks. I know this is what Potter did as well, and a lot of people that didn't work out, but he's learned on the job. He learned under Bielsa. He learned not under Guardiola, but he studied a lot of Guardiola. So his principles have evolved, and I think he's now getting to the point where he's very hands-on. He's very with his approaches, he's very modern in that sense. So I do think he fits the group is another thing that I think is massively key. I think more so than Amorim, and I like both of these options, by the way, but more so than Amorim, I think De Zerbi fits the group as it is right now.
In terms of how he wants to play football or as a character?
How he wants to play football. I think how the squad has been built. I think it's been built for a De Zerbi type system. I think.
What a shock! We've hired everyone from Brighton, so we've built a squad that suits the Brighton manager. What a surprise!
Exactly, and that's the thing. That's where things will go sour quickly. I think he's not as safe an option as going somewhere like Amorim, because Amorim has that winners, he's won before and he's not from Brighton, whereas De Zerbi, he's already going to be painted with that brush now. The narrative is already set before he's even stepped foot at Chelsea. Already the narrative is, they're pinching from Brighton again, so they've got no idea, the plan's not there. Whereas if you look at it, the team that he would be inheriting would be able to play his style of football, and if anything, to a higher degree, because the players that he would have at his disposal, they are better footballers. Whether people believe that or not, because of the positions in the table, fine. That's fine by me. You can have that opinion. But I would say that the difference in quality of player that we have compared to Brighton, if you look at an Enzo and Caicedo, who obviously came from Brighton, Colwell, who he had, Mudryk, who he really rates, these sort of players.
Don't forget about Cucurella, mate. He ain't going anywhere if De Zerbi comes.
He didn't play under De Zerbi, though.
I know.
Yeah, and I actually think maybe we could get another left back still, even under De Zerbi. But the point is really, I like them both, but the thing is with De Zerbi, I think it's more tailor made for him. That's what I'll say for now. But as I said,
do you think that outweighs the Brighton problem, or do you think the Brighton problem outweighs him being a slightly better fit?
I'm really in two boats about it right now. So I've sort of had like three managers in my head. I've not even said who the third one is, but the two of De Zerbi and Amorim, they just both have those aspects. Like I said, I think Amorim's safer because I do think that he'd be afforded more time by the fans. I think less people would turn on him, but the Brighton thing does. I think that weighs quite a big part because he would almost have the pressure to come and hit the ground running. And I don't actually think the squad is ready to hit the ground running. So it's a bit, it's a tough one.
I hear that. I'll two more questions, then I'll finally let Pi speak on De Zerbi. Sorry, bro. There's obviously a lot of talk about that the way De Zerbi plays is defensively like suicidal a little bit. People talk about that, and people also talk about how he can't break down low blocks. Now, the one thing I'll say is there any manager other than the three best managers in the world that you wouldn't go to and say, he has problems breaking down low blocks? Like, isn't that the whole point of a low block, to make it difficult for whoever you're playing against to break it down? But the whole defensive thing, and I'll just say my little slightly ridiculous point, absolutely understand that. Already, look at De Zerbi. He's like a midget. Like, you see, the second something goes wrong at Chelsea, I can already see bloody Petrovic, Colwell thinking, look at this small little mug over there. Do you know what I mean? Like, how can he demand respect? There's little Italian running around here like a Mario, like screaming his lungs off. Like, I know he can, but I'm already like, at Chelsea, everything goes wrong. So that's just what I've been taught the last 3 years. So I'm like, chances are, in 2.5 years or 2 years, I'll hear the reporter, Chelsea players don't respect De Zerbi. I'm like, oh yeah, because too flipping short. Now, obviously, I'm joking. But in terms of the defensive chat that there is about him, people saying, he's nowhere near good enough, especially because recently at Brighton, it's not really gone as well anymore. Like Crispy says here, Brighton either win 4-0 or lose 4-0. Is that a problem for De Zerbi, or is that a squad situation? It's obviously another one of these managers, right? A bit like with Potter, where you're like, we did good things with these players, but the question is, will that translate and will that become better with better players, or will it not?
Yeah, I think, firstly on the low block thing, because I think this is something that I've also wanted to touch on for a while, is I think with low blocks, a lot of it comes down to those like special moments, and like once you first break that low block, especially if it's a 0-0 game and you get that one goal, then the whole game then breaks open. So it's all about finding that first goal and actually breaking open. You only have to break that low block open once if it's from a tie point of view. So if it's 0-0 and then you get the goal, so that usually comes from having sustained pressure, pushing high up the pitch, keeping the ball and just continuing to go at them, and then the more getting shots off, and it just continues to push. And by doing that, you can obviously, that's how you break a low block. Someone like Osimhen, for example, just a box dominant striker, something we still don't have. Jackson, who I rate, but he's not a box dominant striker. This is something that Haaland does as well for City, is if you're constantly making triangles, you're sustaining pressure and you're putting the ball into the box, you've got somebody to aim at. And then even if it's not hitting Haaland, you're getting the drop-offs around him, you've got players surrounding him, and if it's bouncing around, and you've got somebody else to attack it. So just having that presence in the box is huge against low blocks, which we don't have. So I think as well, if give De Zerbi like an Osimhen, for example, you're going to have that box presence, and that helps with low blocks. So I think that's one thing that could massively help. I also think people like Palmer between the lines, against low blocks, similar to, again, Foden, been huge this year for City, breaking down low blocks between the lines, receiving it in the half spaces. You need these players that can play in tight areas of the pitch. Otherwise, the low block's doing exactly what you said. It's there to stop you getting into those areas. So the only way to beat them is to have players that can actually do the job in there and do it well. So, yeah, I've sort of lost where I was with that. I've sort of just gone off at a tangent.
Talking about low blocks, and then the next thing was about like defensive frailties, essentially.
That's it, the defensive frailties. Again, with that comes, obviously, you're pushing higher up the pitch, and that's obviously going to leave you open. But again, I think with Caicedo last year, with Brighton, that was covered over a little bit more. Yes, they conceded goals, but you had him who's good at recovering and having good recovery defenders. Colwell is someone who can do that. You're going to have people like Reece, Gusto. I think that personnel can help with recovery positions and having enough players to defend high up the pitch and then stop it. So I think with the defensive frailties, I think that could improve at a higher club, like a club with stronger level players and also recruitment that will fit his mould, because he knows he wants to play high up the pitch. So he's going to want athletes to cover ground. It's sort of like Postecoglou when he signed Van de Ven. It's the perfect player for him because he wants to play high up, and you've got someone like Van de Ven who can cover so much ground and just win the ball back constantly for him. So it's that sort of thing. I think there's definitely a way that he improves at a club like Chelsea in both aspects for me.
There you go. I think in terms of the defensive issues, I think it's also, and my fear is that we may be losing that, but I think part of it is also a fear factor that if you play like that at a team like Brighton, other teams aren't scared. But like if I saw a little analysis by Thierry Henry of the City Man United game, where he was talking about like City's back three were essentially more than halfway into Man United's half. And he was like, well, if I played for Man United, I would have still waited at the halfway line. And I guarantee their back three would not have waited halfway up in our half if I stayed at the halfway line, me being Thierry Henry. And I'm like, that's the fear factor bit. They're scared of City. So that's why they don't dare to put players higher. But my fear is that we are now slipping into that Brighton mode where like we can try this, but they might not be scared enough of us that it works. I don't know about that. Pys, on De Zerbi, I know you like De Zerbi. I've seen the post on kind of your second account where you're essentially saying De Zerbi is your guy. I'm not sure how much he is your guy compared to say Amorim, but I'll start with the same question I started with for Conor. Do you think that the Brighton negative outweighs the positives that he potentially brings as a manager, or do you think it's the other way around and he outweighs the negative of him being another guy from Brighton?
Well, I think that would be judged based on results, really, and what we're doing on the pitch. I don't think you'd know until then. I also think like the whole Brighton thing, it's like it's kind of a PR thing around it, right? Like it will be probably talked about by like Sky Sports News. Oh, look, Chelsea gone back to Brighton again. Like it's a bit of a.
But do you actually think it's a media thing? Because I think much more than a media problem, it's a fan base problem. The fan base will talk about it being from Brighton much more than the media will.
No, I don't think so. I think a lot of our fans would be really happy with De Zerbi, I think.
But the ones that are not, they will all talk about Brighton. Do you know what I mean?
The thing is with De Zerbi is like, I think, unlike Potter, I'm not saying Potter wasn't appreciated by other big clubs, but De Zerbi is literally, probably going to be in the shortlist for Liverpool, Man United, Barcelona. Like he's very, very well wanted by top clubs, and I think that in itself is like an indicator that it's not really about Brighton; it's more actually about the manager. Okay, It's unfortunately happens to be at Brighton because of our history there, and it's annoying that if we do get him, we'll have to give them more money. But at the end of the day, if we think he's the manager for us, then we're going to have to do it. You can't just go away from Brighton because you're worried about the narrative around it. Like we've just gone and got that Sam Jewell guy, so we're clearly not bothered. We're clearly just going to keep going to Brighton, So
and Brentford was their peace specialist apparently.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't hate that though. I can't lie. Other than the fact that the club are doing it anyway, which is like just part of the whole problem in and of itself. Like, do I think we should get a set piece specialist? Yes. But do I think that the club should overrule the manager if the manager says no? I think that already shows how many problems we have at the.
Well, this is the thing though as well. You had that, but then quickly it was a couple of reporters like, "Oh no, Pochettino's been involved in this. He's been consulted." Like, what a load of rubbish.
He said no, and they were like, but actually,
honestly, do you remember when apparently Graham Potter was consulted over Mudryk and all that? Apparently, he phoned Mudryk. What a load of bollocks! Like, I bet you when Pochettino goes, it will come out, that. He never wanted to set piece to
Mudryk. Guarantee Mudryk didn't speak a word of English before.
Yeah, like it's just because it came out after Graham Potter got sacked. There was all these reports all of a sudden. Oh, Potter didn't want this player. Oh, he didn't want Enzo Fernandez. He felt we should have kept the money. It's like, oh, now it's all coming out. So there's definitely a lot of PR that Chelsea try and cover up through journalists for sure. It's not their fault because it's their job to report. But some of the reporting is like, I can kind of, if I had to guess. I reckon that set piece one is one of the ones where, Chelsea just did it anyway because they wanted to. because they did that under Graham Potter. So what makes you think they would do different under Pochettino? So
exactly, and him even saying like when being asked like would he wish to have more power, more control, and him responding with no comment tells you everything you need to know.
This is my one worry though, because with whatever manager we get, it's probably good. It's not going to be like your Luis Enrique's or someone, like Mourinho would never work here. Like it's not going to be someone that demands as such, but every manager wants things, and even De Zerbi has kind of taken a little jab at Brighton lately. He was asked about like signings in January and stuff like that, and he was like, he seemed quite unhappy about it. So that's the one thing with this ownership and the structure. I don't like how like power hungry they are. Like especially Egbali, like he needs to step back completely. I know it's his club, but he's controlling things, and it's absolutely crazy in my opinion that. The manager, for me, what it seemed like at Chelsea is like the manager, basically you work with what you got. You're just a coach. You don't have that sort of influence over the sporting directors or whatever. Like, obviously they'll brief that, they get to have suggestions and things, but how much do they actually use the manager's suggestions? Probably very rarely, because, you've got Egbali and then, all these other voices, Joe Shields with Stanley Stewart. So, that's my one worry with whatever manager comes is like, are they actually going to be aligned? Because Pochettino, there's been comments where I'm like, Pochettino doesn't like the above. It's clear he doesn't like certain things, and he's only a few months into the job. So, De Zerbi though himself, I mean, I'd be interested in it. I'm intrigued. I do like his style of football, and I think the one thing that possibly is making me more for him than other managers is the fact that all our fan base rates Mudryk, right, and complains about how much he doesn't play. Well, De Zerbi thinks he can win a Ballon d'Or, so you clearly
probably not anymore. Let's be real now.
I mean, you'd have someone who actually believes in his talent, and you could actually finally see, some things unlocked for Mudryk, and you could see Caicedo would definitely become very, very good again for sure, because he knows exactly how to play under De Zerbi, and also Levi Colwill would be very, very good again. So you've got three things there already, and you've got Sam Jewell, who De Zerbi actually said, he really likes him as a person, as a man, and he's done really well. He knows apparently all the players in world football, De Zerbi said. And you've got, Win Stanley, so you've got structural things in place for him, and you've already got three players that he really knows. And like Connor said, I think our squad suits his style of play. Like there was some reporting about how Chelsea's team that is basically just full of technical players, and they need to be taught with just, basic circuits, and they're only good with circuits and certain patterns. And it's like, well, fucking hell, no wonder we're not doing well on the Pochettino, because this guy don't have to train circuits and repetitions and all that, does he? He probably does Gacon tests every session. So with someone like De Zerbi, he's got that set philosophy, and he's strict on the way he plays. I feel like this squad needs that. And one last thing,
I think the fans don't. Like, remember Sarri? He had a strict philosophy. See how that went.
Yeah, but I think
now honestly, we're obviously in a different scenario. I understand. That's true.
Yeah, and also like the whole thing about Sarri was this Sarri ball thing. Like that phrase got peppered from the moment we employed him, and that's the thing the fans didn't like. Everyone was like, when things went wrong, everyone was like, "Oh, Sarri ball," like it got into people's heads. Whereas De Zerbi doesn't have like a catchphrase. Thank God. I honestly think that
Not
Sarri
yet,
ball.
He doesn't. Just give Gary, give Gary Neville one game of commentary.
Yeah, don't call it De Zerbi ball, because then when things go bad, all the fans will be like, fuck De Zerbi ball again. But yeah, that catchphrase didn't help Sarri or Jorginho, because that was not a good time. But I think he suits our squad. But again, it's so hard, because I don't want him to come here and be like, I don't want him to. I don't know if he's got the mentality for Chelsea. I don't know. I mean, he looks like he's got the charisma, but again, I think that's a very important thing with our fans. I think you have to connect with the fans in a certain way.
And again, I'm not sure if him coming from Brighton isn't too much of an obstacle to ever get to this point where his charisma with the fans even matters. Because, like I said earlier, if we win, every manager will get on with the fans for a while. Unless you have a Spurs card like
we won't win regularly, but as long as we're doing a lot better than this season, and there's actually there's actually a style of play and things, then the fans will tolerate it, especially after these two seasons. Like I said last season, how worse can we get? How much worse can Pochettino be than Potter? Well, he's fucking worse, If De Zerbi's worse than Pochettino, based on his time at Brighton and how he plays football, and he can't get a tune out of this squad, then let's just wrap it up as a club, to be honest, because
you know what
a lot of top clubs want him.
A slight fear of mine is, and Conor, you can touch on this, and after that we move on to Amorim, is that obviously, and that's why it's a question to you to in terms of if you know how that was at other clubs, because obviously at Brighton, De Zerbi took over from Potter, who in terms of the way they like to play out from the back, I'm sure there's differences, but there are certainly similarities. So essentially the squad, even though a lot of the players have been changed and sold and whatever else, there is similarities there that the team was already, had learned how to play out from the back with quite a bit of risk attached to it for a club like Brighton. But if De Zerbi comes here now, look at what Poch did. Do you know what I mean? Like, how long will it take De Zerbi to get these players to do this without having a howl every game? And if that is an issue where for the first 3, 4, God knows how many months they will have problems with doing that, obviously having Caicedo, having Kobo will help, absolutely, like you touched on earlier already. But even still, if it doesn't happen immediately, then we're coming back to the problem that Pies just touched on. You say it needs to be better, but if it's not better by October, aren't the fans already turning? Like, do you know what I mean? That's my worry. You can't have. How did it go at other clubs where he didn't take over necessarily from a manager like Potter? Like, has that been an issue for him, that getting his team to play like he wants to, or has he actually been able to do that quite quickly? I'm not sure if you know, but I'm asking you the question anyway.
I've seen in his earlier days it wasn't as plain sailing. Obviously, he actually got relegated at one of his clubs. I can't remember exactly where. Sassuolo was where he first. Pardon?
In Italy, I think he got relegated.
Yeah, it was in Italy. Yeah. But at Sassuolo, he overachieved. Obviously, he took them from sort of mid-table into Europe, and it took a little bit of time, but he created those players. He made them all look better than they were. I think even Boateng was the one that said that. He rose everybody's level, and he's very hands-on in training. So like what Pies was saying with how some of the players have, some of the things have come out that we have circuit-based players and all these like phrases that they'll do better in those systems. De Zerbi's perfect for that because he literally trains circuits every day. That's his thing. His thing is having a different way of getting out of every area of the pitch. It's all about timing. It's all about just luring the press, and everything has a reason. So he's very hands-on. He's very methodical, and he would be giving direction to all these players at such a young age as well. That could help them. People like Enzo, I think, would thrive under De Zerbi. I think like those little patterns, like you said about the timing thing. I think with how long they'd give him, I think a massive thing would be Colwill and Caicedo, because they already know how to play that style of play. They're already patient enough, and I think even now you still see little combinations that Caicedo does. It's still very in that similar breed that he used to under De Zerbi. It just doesn't work at Chelsea yet because the distancing is too far apart and all these things, but he still tries similar things. He just gets caught out because of it. So I think he'd be fine, and players like this. So I think Colwill and Caicedo would really help speeding up the process. But yeah, it may take a little while for some of the other players to get fully into the groove. But we've got such good technical players that playing through the press, a lot of them are good at it anyway.
It wouldn't be an issue, no. But
yeah,
we already have seen, like, Poch might not be good at coaching it, but we already have seen that these players can also have their days where they struggle at beating any press. Do you know what I mean? Especially when Sanchez passes it to the opponent every time.
There's been some howlers this year. Like Disasi's had a few. Like I say, even Caicedo, it's looked like he's had a few, but I think he's trying things that usually worked in a system he came from, and it's not quite coming off because the spacing's not there. I think just Pochettino's style just doesn't suit a lot of the players we've got, and it's hurting us a lot in that sense. Obviously,
and
I
that's
think
what's making me question the whole structure, isn't it? Because they had 3 months last year to pick their new manager, and we have no disrespect to you at all, Conor, but you know that Poch doesn't suit our players. How the fuck do our sporting directors not? Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's why I'm like, what do you then know? Because if you don't know which managers fit the players you bought or plan to buy, what do you know then? Do you know what I mean? And that's why I'm like, if you are in control, will we ever get things right? I don't know. It took us way too long again. Sorry, Conor. Sorry, Pies. I know I promised you. We'll definitely be done by 8. See, my apologies. Let's go to Conor's article on London's First, Pies' website. See, it's all working out together here. On Ruben Amorim. And rather than just reading for everything, you've written it. If you want to write it, link is down. If you want to read it, link is down in the description. Read it yourself. But to start with, Ruben Amorim, Connor, what's different about him compared to De Zerbi is that I know De Zerbi won a Super Cup, I think, with Shakhtar. I don't think he won the league with Shakhtar, which also slightly concerning in and of itself. How didn't he win the league with Shakhtar? Obviously, Dynamo Kiev are a thing, I know. But even still, Ruben Amorim won Sporting Lisbon's first league title in 19 years. Now, someone in the chat said, he won the league against Braga, while De Zerbi has Premier League experience. Well, Potter had Premier League experience. So, I'm just saying. And the one thing I'll say, I said this to you before we went live, Connor, I saw your video. I clicked like on it. I was like, okay, let's make sure we help the algorithm. But I didn't have time to watch all the way through it. What I did have time to watch, because it came out like a day or two before, was your expert Alex's video on Amorim. And just that quick bit that he's basically showed us in his 3-4-3, and I can scroll down to show the 3-4-3 from your perspective as well, screams to me, okay, Caicedo and Enzo will have very similar issues if Amorim turns up, as they do already now with Pochettino. Now, could Amorim set a better structure around it? Could they get better as players and therefore be better suited to deal with those? Sure. But in a grand scheme of things, it still screams to me, okay, same issues. In midfield specifically, around it may be way better. But even still, first of all, please give us your overall view on Amorim. But then also please specify on that specific point that I've just made in terms of, will the midfield not be a problem again if we get him?
Wrong button. Yeah. So overall, I think you're bringing in a character above everything as well. I think he is modern, and he does have the potential to change things that he's doing. And I do think that he will potentially, like, he would move away. It wouldn't just be how it is at Sporting. It wouldn't just be straight into a 3-4-3. But I think you're buying into that character, that he gives you that charisma. He connects with the fans. He's got that about him. I do think, in terms of his personality, I think he suits the club. I think the fans would really get behind him.
Yeah.
In terms of tactics and how he'd set up, I think, again, with that Euro expert Alex, I've watched the same video. I've spoke to him about it as well. I sent him some messages. I think that quite a lot of it is similar to what I've written as well. But one thing that they didn't really touch on is the central centre-back behind the pivot, which does help a little bit with the spacing. So obviously right now, Pochettino, there's only the two centre-backs usually. So if both full-backs are pushed up and then you leave Caicedo and then Enzo pushes forward, you leave Caicedo on an island, he's basically on his own. Whereas with Amorim, it has that, with that three centre-backs, that central centre-back has the potential, and I wrote about this, he steps up into midfield quite a lot. So there's an aggressive central centre-back who covers the space behind the pivot. So if Enzo doesn't necessarily track back after pressing forward, it's not the end of the world, because you still have two in there, because it's become two centre-backs and two in midfield. It's the shape changes as they press. It's very fluid in that sense. So that's one thing they didn't really touch on.
That I've not found yet.
Pardon?
Do you have a graphic of that happening? Yes, there it is.
Yes, it's all down here, yeah. So you have the centre-back stepping up and covering that ground. So someone like Enzo, Caicedo is someone that you'd less, I think, if anything, he'd actually thrive in a system where he's
Can I quickly jump in? Who do you, of our centre-backs, which one do you think is best suited to be that middle one? To do that?
I think Fofana would be brilliant at it, just because I think he's brilliant at reading when to step up. I think he's got that aggressive nature, and then the other centre-backs would cover behind him. So I also think in this system, Reece James would probably play as a right centre-back rather than a right wing-back at all times, getting gusto in the team. So I'd say Fofana as a central centre-back, but I also like the idea of Diomande from Sporting. So it would be one of those two.
Didn't you also say Disasi, bro? I think you also said for the middle one.
Yeah, Disasi would be the other one for me, mainly because I prefer him in the middle than as a right centre-back. I think he's better at that role. I think he's quite good at sustaining pressure, because he's powerful. He wins a lot of his duels when he does step up into that area. So I think he's got that about him that you could quite easily ask him to do that job. He could step up, he can win the duels, and he can protect behind that pivot. It's not too much ground for him to cover, and then you've also got cover behind him. So yeah, I'd say of the ones currently at the club, Disasi, Fofana, and then I would personally be looking at another, just because we'd be playing three centre-backs and Thiago Silva, and I think Chalobah could also be on the way out. So then Diomande, somebody who actually knows that system and somebody I've done work on before, I think he'd be perfect for it as well. So they would be the ones that I'd talk about when I'm talking about that central centre-back, which is just as important in this team as any position. under Amorim, purely because they have that multi-function. They're not just being a defender; they are also covering for the midfield and allowing people like Enzo to actually be released in the press, and Caicedo, who can then press further forward, win the ball back higher up the pitch, and then you can get chances from that. So I think it would actually really suit Caicedo in that sense.
Very well. In terms of the wing backs, right?
Yep.
Are the wing backs real wing backs, or are the wing backs almost attackers? Because obviously, like I said, I watched the start of your video, and essentially where you're talking about like how he does what's kind of now modern, the 3-2-5 essentially build up, right? But then if that's how it works, the wing backs are part of the 5, meaning we're almost going back to the issues that we complained a lot about under Tuchel, where we're like, yes, we have attack players that attack, but half of the players in our team that attack are actual defenders, which, well, it wasn't a problem under other managers. So tell me, why wouldn't that be a problem again? Because obviously certain wingbacks can do that. Reece James can do that. I believe Malo Gusto can do that. There is an argument to be made that Ben Chilwell can do it. But it still puts you in a position where you, again, can't have a winger that properly stays wide. And that, again, limits you, unless you disagree with that, obviously. But doesn't that, again, limit you which wingers can you even buy? Which wingers will we buy? And will they then actually work if their preference is staying out wide, but the system doesn't really allow them to stay out wide because the wingbacks stay out wide? Or is there a scenario in which Amorim sometimes plays wingers at wingback, which, again, Thomas Tuchel also did? How do the wide areas work on Amorim? Because is it just going to be Chilwell, Gusto, Chilwell, Reece? Or do you think there could be wingers in there too?
Yeah, so I think Gusto, for a start, I'll start with Gusto. I think he has the technical security. I think he's good, he's quick enough and he's good enough dribbler that he actually can almost act as a winger. He's not bad in those areas. He's so good on the ball that he can offer that attacking output just as well as quite a lot of our wingers could anyway. So I think for him, he on that right side, I think he'd be perfect. The other one that I pointed out for that position, I think Madueke, I actually think could be really good there. I think he's added a lot defensively to his, as a right wing back, mainly against lower blocks. I think less so against bigger sides where he might need to tuck in a lot more and boot part of that 5.
Wouldn't his left-footedness be a bit of an issue for him?
His what? Sorry,
being quite heavily one-footed, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, I think against low blocks, they tend to, it's all about getting into that wide position to then put the ball into the box, which is something he can do on his left foot anyway, cutting back in. And so I agree to an extent that it does sort of limit that he can't go to the byline every time, but I think he'd be able to combine and whip in those early crosses, especially, which again against low blocks I think would work really well. I think he's got the frame to be a right wing back. I think he's quite powerful. I think this year under Pochettino, he's actually shown since he got back in that he's actually improved defensively. His awareness, his positioning. I was really impressed a few games that he's done playing in that sort of we've been playing that 4-4-2, narrow out of possession. He's been really crucial in that area. I think he's had some really good games there. So I think that is something he could definitely do for us. And then again, that gets another attacking player on the pitch, like you said. Mudryk, I think, could do the same on the other side, but I think Mudryk would be better off in one of the inside forward roles, closer to goal. And then on the left side, that's where I think a signing may be needed, because as Chilwell can do it, but again, I think
it's almost like we had Ian Maatsen, right?
That's literally who would have been perfect for this position. And I said this as well. Technically, like a Gusto on the other side, technically secure, brilliant deliverer of the ball, can tuck in defensively, press in triggers, like he's perfect for pressing. He would have been perfect. So if there's the off chance that we can convince him that he's going to be massively part of this team and that to just ignore the release clause, brilliant, but don't think that happens. So in which case it would be Chilwell, and then I think it would be another signing who could fit that mold of somebody who can create their own crossing opportunities as well as get on the end of vertical balls, because these wing backs a lot of the time are also making those channel runs. So to get on the end of the vertical balls, because something not De Zerbi, something Amorim does is play a lot of vertical passes. So these players have to be able to know when to go in behind and do that. So I think Chilwell can do that, but I think I'd also be aiming for another left wing back if Amorim was the choice.
Absolutely, no, I do hear it. Just quickly before I finally let Pice as thoughts out on Amorim. Again, my apologies. We were aiming to be done before Champions League starts. Just quickly, a best and a worst thing about Amorim, if you have that, so off the cuff, whether it's tactically or in any other capacity, you would like to mention a best or a worst. Which ones are the things that you think should be mentioned about Ruben Amorim?
I think main positives I'd take from him is, like I said earlier, the character that he has. I think a lot of people would get behind him straight away. I think he has that sort of aura of Chelsea. And I know that aura is like a word that gets thrown around quite a lot, but I think a lot of people would buy into him, I think, as a person and just how the character
He has a
I've
hint
seen
of
from him.
Conte for me in terms of how he acts.
And I know I like this, the whole like second special one thing, that is very off the cuff. That's a title at the end of the day. But I do actually see a bit of young Jose in him, and I'm not by any means trying to say that he's going to be like that, because that's ridiculous to try and compare him to one of the absolute greats of the game. But my point being is, I think he has that sort of character for Chelsea. So that's one main thing that I like. The other thing I think is the ability Amorim has to sort of build and use vertical passing as such a key part of his structure. This is something that we actually have a lot of really good players for. And I know Pochettino, to an extent, is known as like he has these vertical passing philosophies, but the way Amorim uses his vertical passing, it's like we have so many players that excel in this area. Enzo is one of the best vertical passers in the league, in my opinion. Then you've got Chilwell, who is brilliant at it, but he hasn't necessarily had all the chances to do it this year. He's been playing as a left back. He's not necessarily always been involved in build up. So he's another one that could do it very well. Caicedo is another player that does do, like, he switches the ball really well. So these switches with intent rather than touches for touch's sake. So this is something else I touched on, because people had that worry of Enzo's touches being limited because he's in Benfica days, you're talking 120 touches. Under Amorim, you'd probably be talking 60 to 70 touches. So the touches aren't there, but if the purpose of the pass is still going to use him, it's decisive. It's making him a key creator, and he'll be having more key passes and more involvement from deeper areas just by having the license to play those passes more often. And it might not mean that he's getting as many chances to do it, but if it works in the system, then he'll still be getting the effectiveness that you need. So it all comes down to that effectiveness over the amount of touches you're giving him. So there would be the positives, I would say. But then obviously the negatives, in the sense of, I think there is the fact that he's coming from another league. A lot of people, there's already quite a few people that don't seem to be on board with it, which again, I like, a lot of people that have said it have also said they haven't watched him or seen anything. They're just going off the fact that it's a 3-back, and that a lot of the players, like I said, the Enzo touches thing, they're going off like key things like that. So I think to build that opinion on him without actually understanding the context behind it is a bit unfair. So again, I think a narrative sort of brush for him would be my main negative, is in the same way that De Zerbi, I think a lot of the coaches at Chelsea, I think a lot of them are already being painted in a negative light. And I think no matter who comes in, I think there's going to be people that don't like it. And I think that's the main negative for me around most of the options right now.
Absolutely. I read that his team quite drastically, so far this season at least, I'm not sure if that applies to every season, has quite drastically outperformed their own XG. Is that an indictment that in this league, with the players that he has, what he does could work better than it may with our players in this league? Or is that just, okay, they're still creating good XG, but their players are just, especially Gyökeres, or however you pronounce his name, just fucking scores everything. Any thought on that? Like, is that a bit like, okay, they score a lot of goals, but if it's overperforming XG, at Chelsea, you ain't getting overperforming XG, that's for sure.
Yeah, that is a slight worry, but I think the chances they create, they do create a lot of shots for themselves. They are a team that he prides them of those front three, especially the two inside forwards and the striker, to get those shots off. They do average around 10 a game between those three. So between like 8 and 10 a game. So that's something that, if you've given the license to the likes of Palmer and Nkunku and these players to get shots off, these are actually players in the past, if you can get a fit in Nkunku and someone like an Osimhen, these are players that do actually at times they can overperform their XG. So yes, Chelsea we're not known for doing that. If anything, it's the absolute opposite. In last years, we do everything, but if anything, we way underperform our XG. So yes, you could slightly worry about that in the sense it's the Portuguese league. Maybe the chances, but it is actually quite a good league. A lot of people, I know.
I think people throw it a little bit under its value, in my opinion, as a league.
Yeah, but obviously, I get that the comparison is still there's still a gap. So I do get that.
I would still very adamantly say that what Amorim achieved with Sporting is more of an achievement than anything Pochettino did with PSG. But each to their own.
Yeah. In terms of an achievement, because Pochettino
that applies to Thomas Tuchel all the same. Because Thomas Tuchel's success before Chelsea was essentially the same as Poch, all at PSG. Pys, I finally come to you again. My apologies, bro. Your thoughts on Amorim? Where do you stand on it in comparison to De Zerbi? Does the back three bother you? Do you think character-wise he suits us like myself and Conor do? Where do you stand on Amorim?
To be honest, I don't have anywhere near as much knowledge as Conor does. The one thing I will say is I watched his obviously his sporting side when they played Arsenal in the Europa League. I think was it last season? I think maybe the season when they won at the Emirates. That's when I was kind of getting quite hot on Ugarte. I thought, honestly, that game, wow, I didn't expect them. I'd never watched them before. I never watched Sporting before. But the way that they actually were outplaying Arsenal at the Emirates was very rare because Arsenal were very, very good. They have been very, very good for a couple of seasons now. And yeah, I think that was one of the games where I was like, oh, damn, he's serious. Because I'd heard about him, obviously, before and stuff. But watching that back three, just the way they passed, and there was always passing options open. Like you could clearly see they had a set way of playing. They all knew their roles. Like there was patterns of play. They were really doing so good against Arsenal, and they knocked Arsenal out. And that's when I knew he was a serious manager. But other than that, I don't know too much about him. Obviously, this is why I get Conor to write articles sometimes because it's good to read as well. But yeah, I think the back three is something, I love a back three. I really do. The only thing I'd maybe worry about, Connor's kind of said about inside forwards. I feel like a lot of our forwards are actually wingers. I mean, Palmer and Nkunku could definitely work as inside forwards, but I'd be a little bit worried about Mudryk maybe. But yeah, I don't mind the back three. I think it's good, and also like everyone paints the back three with a defensive brush. It can actually be very attacking. So yeah, I feel like I'd definitely be open to Amorim. I didn't realize he was 39. I thought he was younger than that. I do feel like
he looks younger.
Yeah, I was going to say one of my doubts would be that he's too young and he cracks under the pressure, but he's not actually that young now, seeing his age. I mean, I don't know. I kind of get that. I know he's got that. I know he's got that sort of aura about him, but I'm not. I don't know. There's something there that I just think. Is he not like a one-season wonder, but is he like, the next Villas-Boas, for example, rather than the next Mourinho? I don't know. But to be honest with you...
But is the Saudi the next Potter? Do you know what I mean? Could also be.
Yeah, I mean, anyone pretty much we get is going to be a risk. That's why I personally really like the Inter manager, because I think he's much less of a risk. I think Inzaghi is brilliant. I would love Inzaghi.
Inzaghi. I said Simeone.
Yeah. Inzaghi and Ancelotti, I think, would be much better, safer appointments. But
Ancelotti, you're not getting Ancelotti. Let's be real.
I think we should try and tempt him back. I don't know, but
I mean, hey, I'm all down for it. But I'm not sure he's all. I'm not sure how much Ancelotti in his latter years feels a bit like Zidane, where it's like perfectly suited for a huge club. If the players are good and he can just tell them, yeah, you are the best, go fucking do it and smash them.
Yeah,
I'm not saying he doesn't have tactics. By no means am I trying to say that. But I don't know if he's ready for a club like us. Look at how it went to Everton. I feel like we're much more closer to Everton than we are to fucking Real Madrid nowadays. Do you know what I mean?
I do think, looking at everything though, like I do think our squad is suited to a De Zerbi more than an Amorim personally, but I just feel like we've got so many technical players, especially going forward. It's like And in midfield, obviously, Enzo Caicedo. I'm just thinking what type of manager could get the best out of this squad. The fact that we've got 3 players here already that he knows so well. It's like, yeah, I mean, one being £150 million investment that we need to make work. It's like everything does kind of steer towards more that type of manager, I think, with the way he plays. But, there's other managers out there as well like that. I think, some fans are big on the Feyenoord manager. I think Slot, his name is, isn't he? I think I know people are big on him because he plays, really sort of similar football to De Zerbi. But yeah, I don't know, to be honest. I'm intrigued by De Zerbi. I am at the moment, but my favourite would probably be Inzaghi. I think we should get Inzaghi. Won't happen, but I think we should try.
Yeah, I was just going to say, do you see there's any chance of us getting Inzaghi out of Inter? Why would you leave Inter at the top of their game? Champions League finalists this year, probably going to win the league again this year. Why would he leave them for us? Again, listen, I know we're
I just get major Conte vibes from him. Like, I just feel like he'd come in and just do really well with us for some reason. But yeah,
maybe. Connor, I mean, you said earlier there is a third name that you haven't mentioned yet. Obviously, if you want to mention it, you can. In general, if I'm asking you between Amorim and De Zerbi, who would you pick? And would whoever you're picking between those two be your general first choice? And again, I personally like to take this unrealistic ones, like, and I'll call Alonso unrealistic. I'll call Inzaghi unrealistic. I'll call, Tuchel, Klopp, these lot obviously unrealistic. Out of the ones that are somewhat realistic, is it between Amorim and De Zerbi for you? And if so, who would you pick?
Yeah, so when I've compiled the list, it was in my head, and I've been thinking about orders. I want to do videos and things. Inzaghi and Alonso were 2 that I would absolutely be right at the top of my list, but I just don't see them as feasible. I think Alonso's Bayern or Liverpool. I think Inzaghi, I just don't think we'd get him. I love him. I think he's brilliant as well. And then the third name I would say for me is Nagelsmann, but there is summer. He was my number 1 choice last summer.
Mm-hmm.
But for whatever reason, he didn't come. There was the whole thing about he had an interview and all these things before they chose Poch. So for me, I also now sort of rule him as very unlikely just because it didn't happen the first time round.
And now the Euros.
Exactly.
You know what? I think based off what we've done so far, I think the top 2, if I had to make a prediction, will be Nagelsmann and Amorim, because we do tend to go back to what we've sort of already, because they've both already had interviews. I could definitely see them being like the top 2 favourites because we already.
Yeah, but you can't forget that we got the Brighton manager last time round. So, De Zerbi weren't an option beforehand. you can't forget that.
We'll definitely interview others if Poch goes, but I could definitely see them 2 being right at the top.
Yeah, they're 2. They would be my 3 favourites. It's Nagelsmann, De Zerbi, Amorim. But as I said, I think Nagelsmann's the least likely of the 3 in my head. That's how, I'd love him. I wanted him last summer over Pochettino. I did a 4,000 word piece about him, and then the next day he was taken out of the hat, and I was literally, all the work that I'd done was just waste. But oh well.
Yeah.
I would say of these 2, I'm still very torn. I find it hard to give you an answer, honestly, because I love different things about them. I think the character of Amorim is huge. I think that he'd be afforded more time. I think it's less of a risk in terms of, I think people would turn on De Zerbi quicker than they would turn on Amorim. But I do also agree with what Pies has said, and I fully believe that this squad, if I was picking one name just to take based on purely the personnel that we've driven towards, it would be De Zerbi. I think he this is his team. This is the exact sort of print of a team he would like. So take that as you will, but that's where I'm at with them 2.
Fair play. I can only really say what I said in the beginning, honestly, where I'm like, even when I've done a bit more research and read a bit more, whether it's speaking to Conor or watching videos, the same with De Zerbi, none of them fully catch me, but that's partly because of what's happened, like what all the other things that have happened at the club, where I'm like, I have doubts no matter who comes that they will be given the tools and the environment to succeed. So therefore I'm like, Yeah, to be honest, I mean, I know I make YouTube videos, YouTube streams and stuff, but I'm honestly in a position where I'm like, I'll sit here, I'll wait and see who they turn up with, and I'll see how it goes. Character-wise, I'd like Amorim, but obviously the whole midfield thing, I have my concerns. I liked your explanation, Conor, in terms of the midfielder steps up, that should help. But I'm like, okay, but if the centre back steps up and you have your wing back super high, then only 2 centre backs defending, that screams like getting destroyed on a counter-attack by a good counter-attacker team. Like, you can already see Rashford scoring 17 goals on a counter against us, and I still never beat Man United. Do you know what I mean?
Just really quickly, the fullbacks for Amorim, in defensive positions, they don't actually press. It's more so they only press in the trap. So they're also part of that back line. So when the defender steps up, you still often have at least 3, if not more often 4 of the defenders behind. So
okay. So when the wing backs step up, the 3 centre backs are aligned, and the 1 centre backs only steps up when the full backs are back. If that makes sense.
So what they try to do is trap. But... Yeah, so they try to trap against the sideline. So the wing backs, they press when the ball is against that sideline. So one wing back will step up to press, the other wing back will tuck in. So it's more so one presses and one sits, and it goes both sides. So you've always at least got 3 to 4 players behind the ball, even without the midfielders in possession. And then when they do collapse into position, it becomes sort of a 5-2-3 in a block.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's about time we wrap this one up. I wanted to 20 minutes ago. My apologies. Please do check out Conor's YouTube channel. Link is down in the description below. Conor Holden Football. Like I say, link is down in the description. Click the ad, and it takes you to his YouTube channel. Of course, check out his Twitter as well. And obviously, please do check out Pys's Twitter and his website, where you can also find the article by Conor on londonsfirst.com that we discussed or looked at earlier. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for watching. Thank you for tuning in. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that like button if you haven't done so already. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for watching. Up the Chelsea, upwards and onwards, and we will see you next time.